Well, good day to you. It is June the 18th, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome everyone to Search for Signs, and as I always like to do, just kind of talk about some websites that give really good background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, about his priorities and those kind of things. Because if you're somebody who's just hearing this information for the first time, you might want to know more about it. And you can, if you just branch out just a little bit and check out some of those websites, all the information is free. You don't have to sign up for anything to get any information, okay, unless you want to, I guess. But if you look at the site like the Share International site, or the site like the George Adamski site, which talks about UFOs and those kind of things, you can get some really good information, so then you can see if there's any truth to it. If it has the ring of truth for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's the best way to do it. That's why I always encourage everyone to check out some of those sites. Now, if you want to come back and join the discussion, I love it when people ask questions, and I got a bunch of questions to cover in this video. Helps me create the next videos that I have. But if you want to ask me a question, email me at searchforsigns@mail.com, or just post your question in the comment section. That's probably the best way to do it. Or if you just want to let me know what you think, post a comment. And I want to thank everyone who did just that, posted a comment or asked a question since the last time I put a video up. Now, I do have a lot of questions coming from one person, so I'm not going to really cover any of the comments. But again, I really want to thank everybody, and I've read all of your comments, and they mean a lot to me, so I appreciate you. Now, RSI 4797 is a person after my own heart, because there was just a lot of questions that they had. So I really appreciate this. So I'm going to go through some of these. Now, unfortunately, I won't be able to answer all of them the way that maybe you would like for me to, but I'll do my best. Hi, Gary. When do you personally think Maitreya will appear on American television? Is that what you're asking? That first question doesn't read very well. Whoever you are, RSI 4797. He already appeared on TV. And actually, he already appeared on American TV. And Ben made the announcement in January of 2010. The one thing that I want to add to that you might not have heard is I had a Maitreya experience at the beginning of 2000, or at the end of 2008, I believe. Maybe 2000, maybe the beginning of 2009. I'm not really sure about the date anymore. But it was maybe about a year prior to Ben making the announcement. But I saw Maitreya on the street, and he said some things to me that really meant so much to me and changed my life in such a way I talk about him all the time. Like, one of the things he said was, I never judge anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. And I always recommend everybody try that, because it really can change your life. If you just start looking at people in your life with just one or two good things and not being so critical, you might be surprised at how your attitude changes over the course of practicing. It's a meditation, really. So anyway, but that's one thing he said. But the other thing he said, and this is pertinent to what you're saying, is he said to me, he goes, you're going to see me on TV real soon, and we're going to change the world together. So I always like sharing that with people, because it means so much to me, that especially since it happened not long before Ben made the announcement of him being on TV. And we're going to do just that. We're going to change the world together. But yes, he has appeared on TV, and according to Benjamin Creme and the Share International magazines, up until the point of his death in 2016, he had been doing interviews nearly every week in the United States, Europe, Japan, Russia, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, if I'm not mistaken, and some other countries. Okay? All right. And let's see. When will the day of declaration happen? 2025, 26, or maybe up to 2030, or even within 10 or up to 20 years? I don't think it's going to be 10 or 20 years, to be honest with you. But, I thought it was going to be a lot sooner than it is. So had you asked me 10 or 20 years ago, I would have said, nah, never going to happen. But yet here we are. So it is all dependent on humanity, what's going on with us right now. And especially if you look at the United States is kind of like a bellwether for the whole world. And I hate to put the United States front and center above other nations. I don't think it's better than any other nation like a lot of Americans do. I don't think we have the best country out there and blah, 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 blah. But I do love the United States, and I do love living in this country. And I can't really see myself living anywhere else but this country. But we got a lot of problems. And unfortunately, we're such a powerful country especially politically and economically, that when things happen in the United States, it affects everything. So what's going on right now is a lot of political turmoil. And I don't see it ending. I don't see it being, smooth sailing over the next 5 months up until the election or right after the election. I think it's going to get really, really worse. Just my opinion, based on what I've been seeing every day, that Trump's not going to quit. He's not going to say he lost. He's just going to say he won. Doesn't matter whether he won or lost. And the Democrats are just thinking it's like an election like any other election, and it isn't. It's an election that we've never had before, because we have a person who's very powerful, has quite a following, and yet is saying he's not going to accept the election unless he wins, because that's the only time it's fair. You know what I mean? What do you do at that situation? Well, we'll see, because last time wasn't very good. I think January 6th is just a dress rehearsal for what we're about to go into. Will it push things back? It might. Will it push things forward? It might. It just depends. But that's kind of what I see. In the end of the day, we're going to be fine. But up until that point, it's going to get kind of rough. I do think that Maitreya is waiting for the stock market to crash. And he had said that in the late 80s, that's what was the last domino to fall. And it tilted back and forth, but never really fell all the way out. Came very close in 2008. And Ben's master said that if it just had been allowed to just collapse, the economic system, in 2008, that would be the last time we ever had to experience something like that. Maitreya would have been able to come out. We'd be living in a totally different world than we are today. He said also that there is a very strong likelihood that we would go to even higher highs, which is exactly what happened. He then said that if it does go out to even higher highs, the fall for all of humanity, from the rich all the way down to the very, 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 very poor, will be much worse than it would have been had it just fallen over in 2008. Because it was pretty bad in 2008. You could have said we went through a depression, but it wasn't like the Great Depression. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're headed for another Great Depression? It might. But as Maitreya says, it's what's going to bring humanity to its senses. It's going to bring us to our knees, but it's also going to bring us to our senses. And then we'll be willing to listen to him about how to get out of that situation. And he's going to say the only way that we can get through this, is together. The only way to really come together is to start the principle of sharing. That's it. So hopefully that answers that question. Well, and also too, when it said this is kind of answers your question about will he cease all conflicts and how will he do this? He is not going to cease all conflicts. Now, he does work behind the scenes and talking to people in governments, whether they're the actual presidents or prime ministers or people who have their ear, who can talk to them, about how to stop certain conflicts. But there's only so much he can do because he doesn't infringe upon the free will of humanity. The only thing that will stop all conflicts is the principle of sharing. It won't, I don't think, stop all the conflicts right away. We might have to go for some time before that does happen. But when people start to feel that their needs are being taken care of a little bit better, there's a little less resentment for countries that are rich and hoarding the resources and then trying to sell, and exploit the nations and so forth, perhaps they'll be a little bit more trusting, So I think it will ease the tensions enough where you could say that there really is peace on this earth. It might be goodwill and not a true manifested peace yet. We might not be a truly peaceful people over the next 25 years, but eventually we will turn the corner, turn the page, whatever you want to say, and that will be the end of it, and we'll never go back to war. And then Maitreya will ask the Space Brothers to give us the technology of light, which will totally revolutionize life on planet Earth. But up until that point, he won't ask them because in the wrong hands, it can be very destructive. All right, so does that answer that question? How many of the current leaders in the world know him? Can you mention some of them? I don't know the exact number. I just know some of the ones that Ben mentioned over the years. Unfortunately, most of them have passed away. The ones that knew him and met him, he met with Nelson Mandela in the prison, suggested to him to send a letter to the then President F.W. de Klerk, And I don't know exactly what was said in the letter, but he suggested that he do it. And Nelson Mandela told him that he didn't think that he would even, why bother? You know, he's not going to listen to him. And Maitreya assured him, because he knew that within the heart of F.W. Clark, as bigoted as he was, his heart was starting to change toward Nelson Mandela and toward apartheid. And he said, if you just send this letter, he goes, I will make sure he gets it. And he did. And he read it. And the rest is history. It was one of the many political miracles in the 80s that Maitreya had predicted would happen, the release of Nelson Mandela. And then the other one was King Hussein of Jordan. The King Hussein of Jordan now, his father, when he was the king, was asked by Maitreya to attend a lecture in London. Maitreya asked him then if he would give some of his land to the Palestinians. He agreed to do it because he was a very good and righteous king. And the Israelis took that land too. And it was quite an unjust situation, and still is an unjust situation in the area. But he knew who Maitreya was. But he could mention that in one of his books because he had passed away at that time. The other one was Willy Brandt, the former Chancellor of Germany, back in the 70s. He was one of the first world leaders that Maitreya actually went and met with. And he encouraged him to come up with a blueprint and that for the principle of sharing, that economists and politicians could understand and wrap their head around, and not just have it be this vague notion of what to do. And the incredible thing that Willy Brandt did is he brought all these very, very diverse, extreme viewpoints, in together in politicians and economists and so forth. And so he wasn't just getting along, he wasn't getting people who got along with him or saw eye to eye on what he wanted. It was an extreme right-winger, extreme left-winger, extreme capitalist, extreme socialist, extreme communist, and so forth and so forth. And there was all these extreme viewpoints. At the end of the day, the miracle that happened was they came up with a consensus. They took the best of everything and got rid of all the things that didn't work. So there's a little bit of communism, a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of socialism, and those kind of things. A little bit of conservatism, a little bit of progressiveness, and they brought it together, and they all had a consensus. Nobody felt left out. Nobody felt disgruntled or disenfranchised, that their vote or their voice wasn't heard, and those kind of things. And they came up with the Brandt Report. And you can look at it online and read it online. It's a little above my pay grade to read, but is extraordinary. Now, the other thing, too, that the other world leaders that may or may not have known who Maitreya was, but were very advanced, most of them were denigrated by the United States. So growing up in the United States, I was never really fond of Castro until I spoke to a Cuban national who told me all about what he was doing in Cuba. And then I read something from Benjamin Creme where he was talking about that Castro actually did more for his people than any world leader on the stage. And it was so advanced and so evolved that he was able to be overshadowed by Maitreya. Whether he was or not, I don't know. The other one, too, that it kind of goes along the lines of the principle of sharing, who was also very denigrated by the United States, was Hugo Chavez from Venezuela. And Ben was talking about him that he had no political aspirations to be head of the country. It was only the love of his people that inspired him to take that role. He wasn't a dictator as the United States media portrayed him to be. And one of the things that happened around the time of the economic downturn, as they like to put it, Bush was the president, and Hugo Chavez, who was hated by the Bush administration and by the U.S. media, American media, offered on his own free natural gas to the United States so that they could give it to their people during the very cold winter that we had that year in the Northeast, especially, that they could use it and not, freeze to death. He offered it to him. It was the principle of sharing for the first time in my lifetime to see it happen, and yet he was hated by the media, hated by it, the Bush administration. And the Bush administration just turned him away, just squandered a golden opportunity to see the principle of sharing happen. And it happened with what was a so-called dictator of a left-wing country that was hated by the United States. And they, like I said, it was awful to see them turn it away. But we would have been able to give free natural gas to heat the homes of people in this country for a time due to the generosity of Hugo Chavez. Anyway, just throwing that in there. And let's see. So then you said, how do you imagine the thousands upon thousands of healings will happen? I guess you're talking about the Day of Declaration. I think they will happen nearly all at once. But then I also think there will be healings going on consistently. The age of miracles has no end, according to Ben's master. So when people start to wake up to the oneness of humanity, a lot of the diseases that they were being plagued with will start to fall by the wayside. Not maybe everybody, but there will be miracle healings that way. People will see Maitreya in their own city, giving a talk and maybe be healed that way. But on the Day of Declaration, I think it will be thousands, maybe even millions of people will spontaneously be healed of all sorts of things, from psychological illnesses to very, very serious physical illnesses. It's one of the three miracles that Ben said would happen. One is he's going to overshadow all of humanity and speak to all of us in our own language, in our head. So everybody above the age of 14 will hear what Maitreya is saying on the Day of Declaration in our own language, in our own head. He will give us a vision of where we came from, how far we've fallen, and where we could go if we tried the principle of sharing. He said also the other miracle will be that we'll all feel his love in such tremendous potency. Maitreya himself said it will be as if he embraces all of humanity at one time. And then, like you said, there'll be thousands upon thousands, maybe even millions of miracles that will happen, or healings that will happen all at once. So yes, I do think it will happen all at once, but that's just my opinion. But there will also be other diseases or other people that will be cured from diseases ongoingly all throughout the next few years and so forth. And then eventually we'll start to use the technology of light. We'll be able to regenerate organs and those kind of things that will be healing more in a scientifically more advanced, but a traditional way, not necessarily the healing from one of these masters. All right. Will everyone deserve to obtain a healing, etc.? According to Ben, it will be based on their karma. So if their karma will allow it, that will happen. What will happen? What will the humanity and life on Earth be? It will be quite extraordinary. So you might want to rephrase that question. I don't know exactly what you're asking me. What will the humanity and life on Earth be? Perhaps you could rephrase that question and resend me the question. I'll try to answer it better for you, okay? Is he going to visit every country? Will his mission be 100% successful? Yes, it will be 100% successful, and yes, he will eventually visit every country. Once the principle of sharing, the main thing that will happen first is Maitreya will start to speak to humanity. More and more people will start to recognize him over the next few years. Then we as a people will demand from our media, who might not be that interested in hearing what he has to say, because he's standing for the people and not for the corporations. Do you see what I'm saying? But humanity will demand from the media him the opportunity to speak to all of us at one time. It's not going to come from Maitreya. It's not going to come from the masters. It's not going to come from some higher spiritual realm. It's not going to even come from the governments or from the media itself. It's going to come from the people. We will want it. We will demand. We want to hear him speak. It'll be a press conference like any other press conference until the moment that he takes the podium. That's when he will speak to all of humanity without uttering a word out loud. We will hear him in our own language, in our own head. Okay? So according to Ben's master, that event will happen for about 25 to 30 minutes. We will obviously, all of us, be floored. So even if you're not in front of a TV, you'll still hear what he has to say. You might not know exactly what is going on, but you'll hear it, and we'll all hear it. Okay? Everyone over the age of 14 will hear it. And so that will be a little bit disruptive. We'll feel the love of the Christ embrace all of humanity. There'll be these millions of miracles, cures, like you were saying. And he said it will be as if we're walking on tiptoe for a time. Everyone will be not wanting to let go of the feeling that they had with this experience. And that will go on for perhaps a few days or a few weeks or so forth like this, and then we'll start to realize that we have a world that we have to save. And then according to Ben's master, people who are interested in this information, whether it's after the day of declaration or now, some will be very interested in the background of the masters and the history of the masters. Perhaps they want to know more about the rays or those kind of things that Alice Bailey talked about after reading Alice Bailey or reading Benjamin Creme's books, or the esoteric teachings and so forth. And others will be very, very concerned about the problems that we have to face then. You know what I mean? The group of people who will be against what he has to say up to the day of declaration will be quite vocal. I think that after the day of declaration, they'll still be vocal for a time, but not have the influence that they once had, and then the changes will be quick, very, very quick, much faster than you and I could possibly imagine will happen. Does that answer that question? Is there going to be capitalism in the form that we know? There will be capitalism and there will be socialism. Maitreya puts it as they're like two wheels on the same cart. You can't have just capitalism like it is today, or just have socialism like perhaps I might like, you know what I mean? Because I guess I'm a bit of a socialist myself, because I'm a humanitarian, right? I want to see people's needs met, but you have to have both. But it's in what measure and what proportion. Right now, the countries that are the closest to what Maitreya is thinking is advisable are the Scandinavian countries, and they're like 70-30, I think. 70% capitalism, 30% socialism is the ratio. He's talking about, I think if I remember correctly, it was 80% socialism, 20% capitalism. So capitalism will take a back seat to the needs of the people for sure. Commercialization will be gone, because that's, as Maitreya says, that's the monster, is commercialization. And there is a distinction between capitalism and commercialization. The markets are commercialization. The corporations that we see today and how they operate is commercialization. But he says it's like a monster who has its grip on the throat of humanity, squeezing out any generous thought or creative notion, I think is how Ben's master put it. So that in and of itself will eventually die. But capitalism in its purest form will be around for a bit of a time, I guess, until money's not needed anymore. But in the proportion, it'll be a lot less. And the markets will take a back seat to the world and not be so dominating as they are today. All right. Let's see. Will there be more justice? Absolutely. No one will starve anymore. No corruption. No more criminals. No more wars. No more borders, etc. There will be borders. Every country is a soul, and it has its own divine purpose. So borders will still be around, but it will be free interchanges of people. It's one of the it's one of the 7 priorities of Maitreya, I think, is the free interchanges of people. So once the principle of sharing starts and nations start to really trust one another, and Maitreya and the commercialization takes a back seat, or eventually ends, and capitalism takes a back seat, and it's not always about profit. Eventually, leisure will be the keynote of humanity. We won't work quite as hard. We have the automation already starting to come online, robots and those kind of things to kind of take care of our everyday needs, schlep the food back and forth, so we're not working quite as hard. We'll be looking to the masters for guidance on how to spend that time and not have it always be about ourselves, but also how to benefit and improve humanity, improve life on planet Earth. But at the same time, we'll be able to travel anywhere in the world for free with no passports, no nothing. You'll be able to go to Somalia and feel safe and see what it's like on that side of Africa, or go to South Africa, and all the places that we would think would be dangerous will eventually be just as open and just as loving as any other place on earth. You know what I mean? We'll also be able to go to the Louvre. I would love to do that. You know what I'm saying? Spend some time in Europe and travel Europe and not have to worry about making ends meet the way that we do today. Eking out a living as we do. And it'll open up humanity's eyes to other cultures, other experiences, things that the rich and the ultra-rich can do today. All of humanity will be able to do. Have the time to be able to do it, to be creative and those kind of things. Will everything be ideal? Nah, I'm sure we'll have points where it will be ideal or not or whatever. And then what is your point of view? What is your information? My information is mainly coming from Benjamin Creme and his books, but also some of the things that Maitreya has taught me and some of the other experiences that I've had and those kind of things. Also, I've read books and watched videos from people like Krishnamurti and read books from George Adamski and those kind of things. Will he appoint or suggest spiritual people or as heads of state in every country? No, we will have to elect those people. But once the soul of each country, remember I was just telling you, each country has its own soul. Once the soul starts to manifest in those countries, those very, very advanced disciples who are kind of waiting for the time to come out will eventually come out and be more recognized by the people for who they are. People on the caliber of, let's say, an Abraham Lincoln or Winston Churchill or Nelson Mandela or somebody like that, who really have the needs of the people in their hearts and not so in it for themselves, will start to come out more and more and more, and we'll elect them. That's because that's who we want. We don't want the good-looking person who just tells us what we want to hear, right? Far different than it is today, but we got a long way to go. But I'm sure Maitreya you might want to listen to that guy or woman. It could be a woman. Women will be taking center stage too in political affairs, economic affairs, social and education and technological things that, just 100 or so years ago were more of a male driven part of, society. Women will have just as much leadership in those roles too as men do as they do today. Let's see. And what will the main changes be? I will quote Maitreya, and I'll leave you with this. The greatest change, technologically, we will be living in a world 1,000, 2,000 years from now, far different than we have today, where energy is free, clean, the environment is clean, people are living and day to day, like every day is different. They're living full, creative lives, full of joy, and trusting and not having any fear from their neighbor at all. Nations won't fear one another. People won't exploit one another. We'll look to the masters on how to live harmlessly and those kind of things. But the one thing that Maitreya said, and I'll leave you with this, the greatest changes we will see over the coming time will be the hearts and minds of all humanity. I love you guys. Thank you so much for the questions. These were wonderful questions. Hope you guys enjoyed the answers. You take care and enjoy the day. And I look forward to putting up videos in the very near future. Take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.